Hello, welcome to my channel. Please excuse my scratchy voice. I've got a bit of a cold. I did this painting yesterday, and the next painting you'll see the day before. But then I forgot to put my camera on for most of it, so I had to redo it. So I just flipped my tracing and to my original drawing, actually. Here it is on tracing paper. I always keep my tracings. I never know if I might want to use part or all of the tracing again. And I transferred it to I'm using my usual palette, pause to see which paint colors those are. And I'm painting on a 9x12 canvas panel. It's easier for storage than actual canvases. And the first thing I'm doing is using titanium white to paint in the clouds. I don't draw in the clouds on a sketch. I just paint those in using pure titanium white. And then for the shadow underneath, I mix in French ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. And that gives me this nice sort of mauve-ish color, which I think makes a good cloud shadow. To get that distance in a sky, paint the clouds closest to you, the biggest obviously, and then just let them diminish as they go further toward the horizon line. I'm using raw sienna and painting in a tree trunk. Now that may not be the colour that it ends up because it's a bit brown, but it's the colour I like to sketch with because it's a nice neutral, and if parts of it peep through, then it doesn't matter. It's still a cohesive part of the painting. And so I always start off with my sketches in raw sienna. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, hydrangeas, roses, whatever. That's how I start my paintings. You don't have to do that. You might have another favorite color. I think raw umber is quite good, but it's a bit dark. And I like to get as much colour as I can into the trunks of trees and stems of flowers, and I like alizarin crimson. I feel it adds depth. It's a transparent colour, and it adds a sort of glaze to things. I'm mixing raw sienna with a little primary yellow and some titanium white, and that's going to be the basic colour of my path. I'm thinking of this as a sandy path leading off into the distance. I'm not sure it's across the cliff top or down to the beach. You can decide what you'd like to think about that. And it's going to be this sandy color, except where the tree overhangs the path. And then I'll be making that shadier with some blues and greens. We've got some construction going on the house, so you might hear a bit of noise. I'll try and keep that out of it. I'm just painting in the distant cliff top here with a sort of mid-tone green. And it may stay that colour or it may change. That's the thing about my paintings. I like to get paint on the canvas, but it's not always what ends up in the painting. And I'm using acrylic paint so I can paint over whatever I don't like or whatever I want to change. And that's the nice thing about acrylics. You don't really have to worry about painting over. You can use gesso and paint over if you want a complete blank canvas in a certain area. That I find just painting over whatever it is I want to disguise works well for me. I usually make my horizon line fairly dark, and if, as in this case, I get a little wonky with it, I just smudge it out with my finger, that's okay. And I changed my mind about the colour of the water as it came closer to land. And I don't think I ever really achieved the right watercolour in this painting. I think I managed to do an okay job with the water, but it was such a small area that I decided just to let that go. Sometimes you just have to let things go in a painting, and then you find in the final painting it really made no difference anyway. It's not what catches your eye or takes your interest, so it's okay just to let things go. I'm using a very old bristle brush. It's quite a stubby bristle brush, and I'm going to use that for the foliage, which I pounce on. I'm using a mid-tone green to start off with, and I'll add shadow and highlight to that as I go along. And I just sort of pounce it onto the canvas. And I usually start off whatever I'm doing with a mid-tone and then add the shadows next and leave the highlights till last. I'm not quite sure why I do it in that order. It's just the order I always do it. And I find routine helps me a lot with the painting in that I know what I'm doing. I don't have to think about it, which is why I sometimes forget to turn my camera on. I just get so caught up in the actual painting that I don't really think about much else. It is really a kind of meditation for me. I just love to paint. To add depth to the foliage, I add French ultramarine blue to the sap green, and that's my shadow colour. And to make a highlight, I add primary yellow and titanium white. And sometimes I'll add straight titanium white on the very tips of the foliage just to add an extra highlight. But I don't always do that. I might do that in this painting. Another thing I do is scrub whatever is on my brush onto the foreground and other places just to get those extra colours and depth into the painting. It often doesn't leave very much on the canvas, but just little bits of that colour will spread all over the painting, and I think it makes the painting come together. I'm using raw umber as a shadow. And I'll probably add alizarin crimson to that as well, and maybe even some French ultramarine blue. Those are my three favourite colours. After the raw sienna sketch, those are the three favourite colours that I like to add for shadow and highlight and depth. I don't often use a round brush for lines. I use a liner brush sometimes, or the straight edge of my brush. That actually gives me a looser stroke, and my paintings are quite loose. I like that about them. I don't care for too much detail. I think it gets too busy, too photographic, and that's not what I want to see in a painting. I want something a bit on the fuzzy side, to be honest. Sorry for the noise in the background. So I put the shadow on the wrong side of that little tree on the right hand side of the path, and I know I take it out later on and put it on the other side of the tree. I do things like that. I don't worry about it. I let it go out there somewhere and just paint over whatever I don't like. I have repainted whole areas of my paintings until I learned this trick of just letting it go. And I either like a painting or I don't like a painting. If I don't like it, I hide it away in a box. And if I do like it, I make a print out of it and I sell the original and the print if I'm lucky. To get depth in a painting, to get depth and distance, I add small things way over on the horizon line, in this case a lighthouse, and I add some birds a little later on. It takes your eye into the painting, and it gives you that illusion of space in a painting. Here I am messing around with the watercolor. I still haven't got it right. I don't think I ever get it right. I think I decided to add more blue to it just to distinguish it from the green in the foreground. I made no attempt to paint the sky in the water, which is what it really is, because water is sort of a greenish colour, but it reflects the blue sky, and obviously I made no attempt at that. I'm using a fan brush here to put scrubby weeds in the foreground. I think that helps give the foreground texture. And I love a fan brush for that. You can use the flat edge of it or turn it on its side and make taller weeds and things. It's a very versatile brush. I'm thinking of this as sort of a sea oat kind of edging, and also that sort of creeping green weed that you see over sandy paths. Sometimes it has a purple flower in it. I might put in some of those too. I think I'd already decided I liked this version rather than yesterday's version of the painting. And later on, as you'll see, I enhanced it using an app, which you can do if you're going to sell a print. You can enhance the original painting because sometimes the painting dries a little darker than you anticipated, and you can brighten it up if you use anything like Photoshop or Paint Shop Pro. I use Paint Shop Pro myself, and it can really do wonders for a painting, especially if you're making a print. Here's where I put in that little flower. It's just alizarin crimson mixed with titanium white. And you see these flowers, don't you, on that sort of trailing vine on sandy paths and down at the shoreline. I don't know what it's called, to be absolutely honest, but they're little sort of trumpet-like flower. I've just dabbed in colour and leave the rest to your imagination. Here I've added a little more highlight, sunlight, than I should have. I think it would have caught the tree more patchily than I put in. I put in long strokes, and but I do things like that. I don't think it harmed the painting in any way. I think someone who's very particular might see that and turn their nose up, but I'm okay with it. I'm letting it go. Just have to let it go, and I'm just going to pretend that the sunlight caught that trunk and it catches the tops of this, the branches and the little tree on the right hand side. So I'm adding that same colour. It's I usually use Naples yellow for sunlight because it's such a perfect colour, but I couldn't find it. So I mixed raw sienna with primary yellow and titanium white until I thought I reached that sort of Naples yellow colour. I quite like the way it turned out. I think I managed to capture distance. There's a long view and there's a close-up shadow which sort of lends a vignette kind of look to the painting. I like that look. Sometimes I put a tree on both sides or something on each side that gives you that view through the shadows. I really like that look. I learned it from an old book I picked up at a bookstore, and I was quite enchanted with that. And I try to do something like that in my paintings to give you that little vignette. I'm putting in 3 little sailboats, just a little curve of white for the sail and a daub of colour for the transom. And I do things in odd numbers. I think it's more charming to the eye. My watercolour teacher used to say that odd numbers were more charming to the eye, and I agree with her. So here's a nod to Joan, and something I learned from her. And I use it in my paintings. I paint in 3s, 5s, 7s and 9s. And I think it looks nice. I think it looks interesting, let's put it that way. Here I'm using a small round to stroke on some alizarin crimson just into the shadows of the tree. I think it punches it up. I think that it adds depth, and it just simply glazes over the darkness of the shadow that was there and makes it, I don't know how to put it. I can use the word interesting again. It makes it interesting to look at. It just adds depth to the painting. Here's where I mess up putting the shadow on the wrong side, and I stood back and looked at my painting and thought, what on earth is wrong with that? And realized what I'd done. And so I changed it. I just went in with a fan brush and some lighter greens, and just brought that shadow, or took that shadow away and put it on the other side of the tree. I should say that when I put the shadow in, I'm thinking of it as a shadow cast by the foliage downwards. I have the light coming from the right, which catches the trunks of the trees, but the foliage casts a shadow on the ground. That's what I'm saying. So that's it, and I'm pretty pleased with that painting. I think I've achieved what I set out to, a sea view with a distant middle and foreground, and you could walk down that path and reach the sea. If you stepped over the frame, that's what I like to do. Well, that's how I like to think of it, let's put it that way. And here you see the enhanced version. I used Paint Shop Pro, and I think it looks lovely. It's a sunny view, and I'm happy with that.